A week ago I shot the second part of the Blackmagic Micro Cinema Camera breakdown video where I talk a little bit more about some things that some subscribers requested, like lens choices, why you need certain components, how certain components work. I also talk about where you can get some of these things for way cheaper, up to like 50% off. This video is really long, so I've cut it down a bunch, but there's still little tidbits of information throughout that a lot of people might find useful. There will be a breakdown of each chapter of the video, so you can skip ahead to exactly the area that you're most interested in. First off, here's the camera. I usually keep the cage on it, and this has the Metabones Speedbooster. It's the EF-BMPCC Speedbooster, and a few things I didn't mention about this is I actually got this from mpb.com, and it was used, and I got it for about $250, which normally this retails around like $600 brand new, which is hard to bite. But $250 used, and the optics are in good condition, the electronics work well. I was really happy with it, and in general, I guess something I should mention as well is the camera itself I got from borrowlens.com and or borrowlenses.com, and they are a gear rental website, and so every once in a while they rent a bunch of gear out, and then eventually they just sell it used. Eventually they sell it used. So I was able to get the micro cinema camera for around $550, and that was including like taxes and shipping. So we're talking about a $1,000 camera I got used for $550, and then I got the BMPCC, which is normally $600 something, and I got it for $250. So already, like, these two things combined are cheaper than buying the camera new. So I've always bought used equipment. I have been blessed to not run into issues. Some people do, but I have never bought a brand new camera. I buy new lenses usually, so that's why this Metabones was kind of scary to buy, because I was really worried that some issue was gonna be with the optics or whatever, but it was either that or get one of the Zengyong, one of those Chinese speed boosters. I was real close to getting one, and like, people seemed on the fence whether if there was issues with the Zengyong. I didn't care too much about the electronics, and the good thing is that the micro, it doesn't freak out if like the lens electronics aren't communicating. It does not care, it still operates, so that's a real good plus. So you got the buttons right here, which mainly all you really deal with is the power in the menu and this play is select. You really don't go around into the menus too much. Other than the format, the card, I stay on the first menu all the time. I keep the camera at 800. I shoot RAW a lot, so it really doesn't matter, but I generally always shoot at 800 with this thing. I've tested 200 and 400, and I've tested 1600. I've tested it for highlight detail and bright scenes. I've tested it for low light, and to be honest, if I'm worried about low light, I'm gonna shoot in RAW just in case. So I can grade a little heavier and lift things up. But when it comes to ProRes and stuff like that, generally I stick around 800. And so then you have the full HDMI and the expansion port, which is where this guy comes in. And you have the SD card and the microphone. The audio is not terrible if you use like a Takstar. Oh, let me see if I got mine. So I have one of these. It's like a Rode VideoMic Pro, but it's made from Takstar. It's a Chinese company. This is $25, and it's phenomenal. It is great. Like, it can compete with the VideoMic Pro for days at like such a fraction of the cost. So definitely worth it. I usually use this on my videos, my YouTube videos. I don't really use it in client work, but in general, I would never use the audio from this thing for client work. If I was shooting like tests or YouTube videos, it's perfectly fine close up. And then another thing is the SD cards. I wanted to go over, so this SD card right here is the best card to use. I think it's linked in the previous video. I'll link it in this one as well, but this is the best card to use for this one. Technically, if it was up to me, it would be the only one I use. And what's specific about it is the Extreme Pro, it's Class 10, the number 3 right there, and then the V30, 95 megabits per second. So 95 megabits per second, Extreme Pro, V30, 64 gigs, handles all codecs, all frame rates on this camera. It is the best. You try to use the 128, you might run into issues. You get a V60, which is the newer generation, you're gonna have issues. I bought several V60s, got home, put them in, camera doesn't read it. It doesn't even act like there's a card in there. So only use V30s. Now the Class 10, that's basic. I actually forget what the 3 is over here, but the Class 10 is basic. Like, it doesn't matter if you're shooting on a T2i or, you know, whatever, you need a Class 10. But it's mostly about the 95 megabits per second Extreme Pro V30 64 gigabyte. This exact card, you will be 100% perfect running anything on this camera. Now, I will bring out my other cards that I use, just because sometimes finding this card is a little difficult. It's an older model, and I think it's technically discontinued. So these are the other 2 cards I use. My secondary card is actually a micro. So I'm gonna have to do an insert shot. But so this micro is a 128 gigabyte. It's a V10 Ultra Plus. It's just a SanDisk Ultra Plus. It comes in an adapter. I used to make fun of people that used micro SD cards because I'm like, what the heck are you doing? But this thing holds up really well. It handles ProRes HQ for all frame rates fine. I want to say I ran it for at least a couple minutes on ProRes HQ. I think it did everything fine. It does RAW 24 and 30p fine. However, RAW 3 to, and when I say RAW, I'm talking 3 to 1. I don't really use full-on uncompressed RAW just because you're not really getting too much more to compensate for all that extra data that you have to spend on it. So, but when it comes to RAW 3 to 1 60p on this card, I want to say it got a minute in before it started dropping frames. So that's a good sign. That's not bad. That means it's probably dropping frames like 1 every 100, possibly like 2 or 3 every 100 frames, which isn't bad, isn't super bad. Might even be less than that. So I normally call this my high-speed card, but this is the card I keep in the camera most of the time to do most of my videos because I shoot 24 and 30p most of the time. So this 128 gets me a long way, and then when I do some slow-mo stuff, I focus on this card. And then, let me just put this back. And then this guy right here, this is just an older card that I had from the Canon 6D when I did Magic Lantern. So the 6D only writes at 45 megabits a second, so most cards work perfectly fine, even for Magic Lantern RAW. Back then, that wasn't really the case, but this is a 90 megabits per second, so this is what I used on the Canon 6D Magic Lantern RAW. I do use it on the Blackmagic cinema camera, but funny enough, pretty much just does ProRes. It'll do ProRes at any frame rate, HQ, LT 422, whatever. But I want to say RAW. I know it doesn't do RAW full RAW. I know for sure. I want to say it doesn't do any of the RAW 3 to 1s either. So I just keep this as a backup if I'm doing like long format videos. I just run this at ProRes 422, 30 frames a second, something like that, and just let it run. To the CGPRO Breakout Box. The thing about this Breakout Box is they are made in the Ukraine, and I think they are still being made. Actually, I don't know if they're all being made in the Ukraine, because CGPRO, I think, is a British brand. I don't know. But, so buying these and shipping these take a while. It's not as slow as China, but pretty damn near close. I was able to get this on eBay for, I want to say, like, under, like, 30 bucks, something like that. They're normally 38 euros, which comes out to, I can't remember. It's either slightly under or slightly over 40 bucks. But I'm pretty sure I got this at a decent price on eBay from Brooklyn, and it was here in a couple days. So, you know, Amazon has spoiled us all. I can't do anything less than a week in shipping. I just hate it. So to attach this, it's much like an old VGA plug for like a big old desktop from back in the 90s. You just line it up and then plug it in and tighten it down. And I'll go over something about this DC 12 volt thing. I actually ran into some issues when I first got that. So this, I want to say, came with the battery. This is a plug for the battery. Yep. So the thing is I believe this black one is 12 volt, and then this yellow one is supposed to be another voltage, because this doesn't fit, which makes you think that this is not 12 volt. Every 12 volt cord that I have had in my home or like looked out and found, if you look on the battery, this is yellow and this is black. This goes in just fine, but it doesn't go in there. But this will go in the 12 volt. So I don't know if, I've been running this for like a year, haven't had problems, but if you have a breakout box and you're plugging into a battery, what you need is a 12 volt to a 9 volt cable, okay? And then it doesn't matter which. I did some research, so I'm not so ignorant. I did some research, and this cable doesn't do anything to transform the power. It is literally just a cable. Electricity goes in here, electricity goes in here, or, you know, in and out, whatever. So me plugging into here and then using this 9 volt cable to plug into the 12 volt, it works just fine. One note I will say that kind of weirds me out to this day still, but hasn't really run into issues, is that when this battery dies and I switch the battery, this battery, into the breakout box, it will start charging this thing, and it charges it mad quick. Like these usually take like 15 minutes to charge. I swear to God, it'll charge the whole thing in 20 minutes. So I wonder what is going on, because this, I believe this actual output is, or the micro is able to input from 9 to 20 volts. I'll have to double check their website, but it was like, it's a range. It's not like 12 volt only. The micro takes a range of voltages. So I'm wondering, I don't think it's this either, even though this is like Chinese and it's a mystery on its own. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it's because this inputs a range of voltages, and let alone we're putting a we're having to use a 9 volt connector, even though it says right there 12 volt, and it charges the battery super fast. I don't know, it hasn't caused issues, it's just a weird quirk, but so I'm not complaining. I'm glad that Ava Lanois suggested this, because there really isn't a lot of information about the micro, which was kind of a pain when I was thinking about buying it, and when I eventually did ended up buying it, and there's still just not a ton of information. You know, it's a pain in the ass, but like once you use this thing for a long time, you figure out all the weird odds and ends. Okay, so we're gonna move on. So I'm just gonna attach the VCT plate. This is a small rig VCT plate, and like I said, these rods were originally from the Newer shoulder rig. So there's actually this little blue thing that would go in here and it would connect it. So I want to say this is about 8 inches. So if you get small rig rods and you want the same exact setup as mine, I would go with 8 inches, because I'm pretty sure there's no way this is a foot and there's no way this is 6 inches. So I'd say it's 8. And just screw this bad boy in. Okay. So there we go. And then I will just go ahead and throw on this Tokina. So this was the first lens that I bought for the micro, and the reason a lot of people might have this, well, I know 1835 Sigma art is like the kind of standard. I wish I had one. I'm happy with this one though. Like, so when you get the micro, you aren't going to buy all of this at once. This was all slow. It took, when I first got the micro, it was literally just the camera, no cage. I had this cold shoe mount on the top and a 7-inch screen with the Tokina just plugged into it. The first thing I bought when I got the micro was the Tokina, because without the Metabones, the crop factor is just terrible. So when you have a wide angle lens, let alone a wide angle zoom lens like the Tokina, when you have the 11-16 on the micro without a Metabones, you're looking at it's essentially like a 35-50, which are my two favorite focal lengths. So I was like, dang, that's pretty nice. So a 35-50, it didn't bother me too much. But, you know, 2.8, not the best thing in the world. And to be honest, you know, the image, the sensor's somewhat soft. When I first got it, I remember going online and talking to people about how am I getting stuff in focus? Why am I not getting stuff in focus? And no, it's in focus, but like it's just so flat and the sensor is just kind of soft. So you have to have a tack sharp lens to really get any kind of sharpness in camera before a grade. So the Tokina 11-16 isn't known for being sharp. It looked fine, like it looked fine. But the Metabones Speedbooster, some people don't agree with me, but I know for a fact this thing sharpens. It straight up sharpens, because now the Tokina on here looks real crispy. Before I got the Speedbooster, the Sigma 24mm, which I'm filming on right now with my Canon, the Sigmas are sharp. The Sigmas are mad sharp. That's why people love them. So the Sigma on the micro without a Metabones, it looked nice. It looked good. So you put a Metabones in between the two and boom, the Sigma's even sharper. But the Tokina is sharp enough now with the Speedbooster. And with the Speedbooster, the focal length is closer to 22. It's a 22-32 or something like that. And it's a 1.8, I believe. The Sigma goes down to a 1.1 when you're using the Metabones. So 22-32, 1.8 becomes pretty nice. It's pretty good to have. I will say the Tokina flares a lot. It's got this strange circular flare that shows up in some of my music videos that people love, and it's like sometimes you love it and sometimes you just want it to go away. Yeah. So now I will move on to this little guy, which is kind of my weird concoction. I swear I stole this from somebody. Okay, so this is the Railblock. I think I called it a rod clamp in the last video. This is a Railblock from Small Rig. It just goes onto rails. I think I had this piece from my older rig that I used sometimes. And then this is just a small cheese plate. So when you buy this, and you can always check the links in the original video. I will probably put those same links in this video, but it can become confusing because there's a exact cheese plate just like this. You want the small one. This is the small one. On one side, put a strip of Velcro down and then cut these little areas out so I can screw back in. A few things I could say about the battery is it's got 5 volt, 9 volt, and 12 volt, just like I said in the original video. The 12 volt is in and out actually, so when you want to charge it, you will actually, you have like a wall plug that you plug into this and you switch it on and then you plug it into the wall. Apparently you're not supposed to plug it into the wall with it off. It's bad for the battery. people have reported sparks flying. I've never had a problem with it, but I just always do what the manual says, and that's just turn it on when you're charging it. And it has this little indicator light on it, which is great. It's actually at half, which I never see. I never see this thing go below half, because think of each one of these dots as a full day shoot, because usually it's fully charged, and by the 6th hour of a shoot, it might drop down to 3. So, and then I really don't charge this thing but once every 3 shoots, and at that I'm just topping it off. I've never let it die all the way. I probably should though. Okay, so few couple things about the monitor. It's got the LH5T, which I just got last week. I have shot with it on a paid gig at this point once or twice, and loved it. Came in clutch. The LUTs work great. I hate the Blackmagic film to 709 LUT, so I was able to make my own, which are a little softer on shadows and a little more sharper and just easier on color, and they help a lot. So if you want that Blackmagic LUT that I designed specifically for the micro, I'm sure you can use it good on the original Pocket. I'm sure you can use it on the Pocket 4K and probably the Ursa Mini Pro, but you got to use V1 Color Science in the RAW tab. I would think that since this is running V1 Color Science, that you would need to run V1 Color Science when shooting RAW. I don't know if the LUT will perform the same if you were using ProRes on the Pocket 4K or the Ursa Mini Pro. But for the original Pocket and the Micro, the LUT should work great. So check that out. That's on my website, and I will link it in the description below. But yeah, this monitor is great. Got this little battery plate that you can take on and off, which is awesome. It uses NPF, and I actually generally just plug it into here. And then it also has false color, which I have never used, and I think now that I have it, might as well learn how to use it, because people say it's great. But having real waveforms really does help a lot, rather than histogram, because histogram really doesn't tell me too much. It gives me a general idea, but when it comes to exposure, I've just become way more anal about it. So having a real waveform to tell me like where someone's skin level is great. And eventually, I'm sure I'll use false colors. So that's how I put everything together. Usually run power to the monitor and HDMI to HDMI in the camera. And that's pretty much it. Let me know if I forgot anything. If anybody's got some questions or notes or whatever, hit me up in the comments. I'm down to talk. It's really cool that everybody's got feedback and really interested in this stuff. So it makes me feel good. I really appreciate it. Keep it up, guys.